Hello, BookTube. You read that title correctly. It's the last week in BookTube, the raucous return of a feature on this channel in which I look back at the previous week or so of videos on YouTube and rate the super hotties. I haven't done it in quite some time, but I want to get back to doing it regularly as clockwork. Maybe not entirely this year, but certainly next year. And as a sort of a prelude, I thought I would do an episode of Last Week in BookTube. So I have notations ready here. I want to start off with a few general things. I don't have any visuals here, of course, but the first thing is a feature that's a regular feature on its own channel. I'm sure some of you will know it. It's Kamil at What Kamil Reads. He does the Lit Talk, and he did his third episode. They're videos in which he sort of pulls back from the more pointed, more narrow video content and just sort of talks about his literary life. And some people, when they take away the strictures and just natter, the results are hideous. 45-minute long videos. But some people it works really well. He's really good at it. So the video is fascinating. Then let's see here. Oh, yes. David at the Poptimist did a book tag. Anything would have been a better title than that, but that's all right. It's a survey that he did on his own channel. I'll leave a link to it down below, where he has a Google Doc all set up, but he also wants to get people to do the tag version, where the booktubers who are, I mean, it's for everybody. It's for anything that you read. But really, in a way, I think it's kind of aimed at the booktubers who deal in larger part or in whole in new releases, to get sort of a feel for the groundwork of BookTube's own appreciation of literature, as opposed to the official award ceremonies that tend to disappoint. And that tag has been going around. So I'll leave a link to two. Britta and Adam at Memento Mori both did it and did wonderful jobs. Both of them completely different, but wonderful jobs. Also, the Rhodes vlog. Chris and Giselle Rhodes, the booktubers who you have to thank for me, or maybe not thank. They're the ones who eventually got me into BookTube, and they've been uploading vlogs from their life in the last 10 years, because they just won't let go. And the vlogs are fantastic. They extend back far in time in terms of the internet. But they're absolutely fascinating. They have a gift for daily vlogs. I also want to mention a new event. A new read-along in November. It's Boldly Govember by Paperback Junky, in which, of course, Paperback Junky created Pentathon, the easiest flip and readathon you'll ever do. And the goal of Pentathon was to make a readathon that anyone can do easily. And he's outdone himself with Boldly Govember. As you might be able to sort of infer from the title, it's all about Star Trek. And the goal for Boldly Govember is to read one Star Trek novel in the month of November. And if you're a booktuber, maybe make a video about it. That's pretty easy. I intend to do a lot more than that, but I'll leave a link to his announcement video, which is funny in its own way, kind of low tech. But so was the original Star Trek. Let's see here. Waterstones, the channel for the bookstore, had an interview with David Attenborough, the legendary David Attenborough, and it's not to be missed if you're a fan of the man. I don't know anyone who isn't, but it's a lot of fun. Let's see here. Oh yes, the book Finch started a feature on her own channel called Headcanon Hour, in which she talks a little more in depth about something, some book, some series, some idea, or whatever, with the explicit understanding that if you go to Headcanon Hour, you are not any longer worried about spoilers. It's not going to be that kind of a thing. It's going to be a feature where she just talks about it. She started off with A Song of Ice and Fire. Very good episode. Hope she continues it. Let's see here. Claudia at the Spinster's Library had a wonderful video as sort of one of the many responses that are starting to crop up to Victober, in which she decides for one afternoon to read like a Victorian, meaning shutting off technology. The only thing that she kept was her camera, the camera of her phone, but nothing else, no internet. And I loved it. Of course, you can guess the point that I wanted to make when I was watching it. I think I made it out loud to my little schnauzer, which is that's how you should read. That's how you should read. In this, as in all other things, the Victorians should be our exemplars. you should read without the distraction of technology. Of course, you should. If you do that, your reading speed and comprehension and retention will all skyrocket. And if you don't, then they won't. So all reading should be reading like Victorians. But let's see here. What else have we got here? Oh, yes, we had a debut. We have many debuts, of course, if you do the BookTube newbie tag. If you look for that as a search on YouTube, you will find every week's new crop of booktubers, many of them, and that's just the ones that make the tag. In this particular case, the booktuber did not, and I'm really hoping if he watches this video that he will correct that oversight and do the BookTube newbie tag so that he can be found. But it's Todd Oval, who's left comments on many of your videos. His channel is called Todd's Bursting Bookcase, and he's made a few videos now. And although he might scoff at the idea, I think he's a natural. He just needs to make the BookTube newbie tag. That's all. There's a certain amount of courtesy and structure that is developing in BookTube. We're going to get to that later on. And the BookTube newbie tag is one of those things. It's a treasured ritual. And last in the general category is Ryan at For the Love of Ryan. He also, the backstop idea of read like a Victorian was maybe I'm not getting enough reading done. He also noticed at some point that maybe he was not doing enough reading and decided to do a daily commitment commemorated in a vlog style called The Hunt for Red October, READ, which is, it's ends up being a reading vlog. And it's fascinating for that. I think reading vlogs are fantastic. A glimpse into somebody's reading life, the ups and downs of it, the locations of it, the times of day and the moods of it. But it's also designed to focus on reading, designed to get more reading done. I would recommend, if you're not familiar with his channel or if you haven't been watching The Hunt for Red October, I'd recommend that you binge on the whole of them, the whole series of Hunt for Red October so far. And of course, I know there's no chance of it, but I hope he continues to do daily reading vlogs for the rest of the time. But then we'll move from the general to reviews. I myself am a book reviewer, so I notice book reviews, and I love them. And the batch of reviews I want to show you today makes a point about BookTube, inadvertently. I mean, I want to point out about these reviews and about this whole episode of Last Week in BookTube that, of course, this is not comprehensive. This is not a comprehensive list. I watch an enormous amount of BookTube, but I miss an enormous amount of BookTube. I miss far more than I watch because of the sheer number of people doing it now. And I like a lot of the stuff that's not on this list. This is just a list of some things that I saw that I found interesting and that I would hope you would find interesting if you hadn't already seen them. These reviews, for instance, I must have, in the last week alone, I must have watched 100 reviews, 150 reviews, and I've only got a few for you here. In fact, I've got 4. The first one being Shawn the Book Maniac. Needless to say, I recommend all of these channels in addition to these specific videos. And Shawn is, he's violently, passionately in love with Barbara Pym. He could have done worse. And he did a review of what I consider to be her greatest book, Quartet in Autumn. Most people don't consider that to be her greatest book, and I'm pretty sure that Shawn doesn't consider it either to be her greatest book, but nevertheless, does a wonderful job in his review. There's also Erica at Perks of Books. She did a review of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and it was a wonderful job. Shay did a very enthusiastic review of Naomi Novick's Uprooted. And the Happy Bookworm, or the Hungry Bookworm, did a very pretty, very good book review of Helen Houck's Lantern's Ember. And the thing to notice about those 4 book reviews, and 3 of them in particular, is that the first 3 book reviews that I named are not about new books. They're about items from backlist. And that's, in my opinion, one of the glories of BookTube, is that can happen all the time. And provided the person making the channel has made a welcoming destination for you, then you'd be happy to listen to them talk about anything. That's the whole point, I think, of BookTube, is bookish friends who can talk about anything. And whether you're interested in reading the book or not, you will tune in and you will listen and maybe make notes and maybe be convinced. I'm glad to see so many book reviews, considering that the mercenary side of YouTube uploading is that book reviews get fewer watches in the short run. They do well over the long term, better than anything else you do, but they don't do well in the short term because people see immediately which book it is, and they decide, I don't have to watch this video because I'm not going to read that book, or something silly like that. So I'm glad to see so many book reviews. I will always include them in Last Week in BookTube. And then we'll do, the next section we'll do is sort of a deeper videos, more conceptual things. Sometimes this is the area of Last Week in BookTube where I disagree with my beloved BookTube colleagues. That happens. In this case, in fact, right off the bat. Courtney Pickles, a fantastic BookTube channel, did a video on authors she will not read. And it wasn't what I originally thought. I saw that title and I clicked on it thinking, okay, these are going to be authors that just don't interest you at all. But no, it was different from that. It was authors that she won't read because she disapproves of them, of their biography. She mentions Margaret Atwood and her disdain for science fiction, a genre that she condescends to write in. I totally agree that her attitude towards science fiction is reflected in what a crappy job she does writing it. But one of the other people she mentions is an actual expert in science fiction, Orson Scott Card, who has loathsome social positions, loathsome social views. He's a bigot. And I have to disagree with the gist of the bedrock of Courtney's video. I don't think that's a reason not to read an author. I don't think there is any reason not to read an author. I have, of course, been incensed with authors' opinions in the past, and sometimes I've let it spill over into saying, I don't like you at all, I'm not going to read your book. And I understand the argument that says you don't want to put money in their pocket. So you wouldn't go to a bookstore and buy a brand new hardcover by Orson Scott Card because he's directly profiting from that sale. You are directly putting money in the pocket of someone who has horrific views, who is, at least in some aspects of his life, not someone you'd want to hand money to. That part maybe I understand, but not to read them at all? Not the library, not anything? Just because of their personality, because of their opinions, because of statements that they've made? I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I'd be fascinated to hear what the rest of you think. In fact, how many of you fall into Courtney's way of thinking? Are there authors who you avoid because you don't like what you know of them personally? I would find that fascinating. So, of course, on this subject and all others, sing out in the comments field, because I'm still on wobbly legs. It's been so long since I did Last Week in BookTube. Then there was another video. Again, I'm going to marginally disagree. Another great booktuber, the Bald Book Geek, did a response video to Lindsay Ellis's video about manufacturing authenticity on video, and he largely agreed with her points that when I do a video, I'm wearing bronzer, so I'm not quite so pasty. I'm editing out my ums and ahs and awkward stops. I'm using a camera. I'm using technology and software to present you with a highly curated image of myself. At one point in his video, the Bald Book Geek says that authenticity is impossible in a video format. And he's echoing Lindsay Ellis, who said the same thing. And I don't agree with that at all. Authenticity is not affected by whether or not you curate what someone sees. It's affected by whether or not you alter what someone sees, whether you alter the nature of it. I have never met the Bald Book Geek. I doubt I will ever meet the Bald Book Geek, but I have a strong suspicion that I know what he's like as a person. I don't think he conveys anything that's false in his videos. Conveying something false in your video, whether you do it, in one take with no editing, or whether you do it with the best lights and editing software in the world, conveying something false takes work, takes a conscious decision. There are plenty of YouTubers and unfortunately plenty of booktubers who do that. They convey not just a curated image of themselves, but a false image, something nothing like what they're like in real life. I don't think the Bald Book Geek does that. I don't think the split is between careful editing or advanced technology and authenticity. I don't think it breaks down that way. Maybe he didn't intend it that way. I might be missing the subtleties of his argument. One way or another, I think it's extremely germane for BookTube, which I like to think of as a very authentic corner of YouTube. People who just turn on their cameras and talk. Perfectly fine if you want to make it look professional. Not perfectly fine if you are lying to your viewers. For instance, an example of someone who makes perfectly clean, careful, professional videos would be Olive at a Book Olive. But she doesn't ever lie to you. She's never not authentic. I understand. In most cases, my own channel would be a drastic exception. I am every bit as ungainly and tedious in real life as I am in these videos. I sometimes even don't remember whether or not I have had a thought on camera to you or I've had it just in person because I'm so accustomed to talking to you. But even the booktubers who put a lot of time and effort into making their videos look authentic, look very clean and professional, don't necessarily have to be lying to you. Jen Campbell's another perfect example. I don't think she misrepresents anything about herself in her videos. And yet they're wonderful to look at. But anyway, I'll leave a link to his video. It's very thought-provoking. And if I remember, I'll leave a link to her video as well, although he links to it. It's a thing well worth thinking about. Then the last thing that I want to mention in this little section before we move on is it was wonderful. It was extremely thought-provoking. It was extremely touching. It was Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. She did one of those videos that's so, again, authentic, because two things were nagging at her mind, and they weren't explicitly connected. One was Close Range, the short story collection by Annie Proulx, and the other was the 20th anniversary of the murder of Matthew Shepard, a young gay man who was tortured and left for dead and eventually did die by, homophobic, brutish, laughing guys in his small town. A horrible, horrible story that gets worse the more you think about it. I studied it. I followed it closely when it was being originally reported. And the original reports, they made the horrible true point, which is that Matthew Shepard died slowly. And he had to have heard the mocking laughter of his killers when he was too weak to do anything about it, and then just got weaker and weaker, probably calling for help that no one could hear, strung up on a fence like a scarecrow. And those two things were buzzing around in Kelly's mind, and instead of ignoring that or artificially and brutally streamlining it, she instead made a video about that confluence, and it's extremely honest. It's extremely good. I'll leave a link to it down below, but it's well worth your time if you missed it. And that was last week in BookTube, except for a new wrinkle that I want to add here, where we'll do steadily widening concentric circles of buzz of news. We'll start with BookTube news, and that is an unfortunate thing that happened this week. Those of you who've been on BookTube for a while will know that every November, Olive at a Book Olive and Gemma at Nonfic Books do Nonfiction November. It's now in its 4th year. It's a big deal. It's lots of fun. This year they're doing a bigger job than ever with reading groups and hashtags and Twitter and all that. And it's designed to encourage you to read more nonfiction in the month of November, or to read any nonfiction if you never do, if you give it a wide berth. It's designed to praise and enthuse over nonfiction. And a group of newer booktubers obviously did not know about Nonfiction November. I mean, BookTube is huge now and growing all the time, so it's totally understandable that they wouldn't know. And they launched their own announcement for an event that they decided to call Nonfiction November. And awkwardly, tentatively, awkwardly, friendly, booktubers made it known to them. Words seeped back to them that actually there already is a Nonfiction November, and it's well established. And I have to say, what followed, I mean, these 3 concentric circles of news are all really about bad reactions. And what that group of smaller booktubers did was, in my opinion, a bad reaction. The correct reaction would have been to come up with some radically redesigned read-along of your own for November, if you still want to do one, and to enthusiastically join the fun of Nonfiction November. And instead, as far as I can tell, they just renamed their Nonfiction November event to NFN, which is the initials for Nonfiction November, which is a BookTube event that already exists. So it really just, moves the goalpost a bit, but it doesn't change the problem. And I wish I wish that weren't the response. That could easily have been the first thing that came to their mind, but I wish it wasn't the thing that they stuck with. And I'm hoping that there's still plenty of time. I'm hoping that something other than that happens. Not NFN is Nonfiction November. That's what the letters are abbreviating. And Nonfiction November is an event that already exists, and that's just. It's just an unfortunate thing that the people who thought up the second Nonfiction November weren't aware of the first one, but we need basic ground rules of civility here, right? I mean, it's not anybody's fault if you don't know about it, but how you react to it is definitely on you. And that definitely applies to, if we go one concentric circle out from BookTube to general YouTube news, then how you react to something is definitely on you. And it's a larger thing in the general YouTube, the place where it isn't quite so friendly or placid as our little corner of BookTube, and where we're dealing with lots more people with the hundreds of thousands and millions of subscriber counts. And it's an online service. It's an online advertiser who went the rounds to a lot of those larger booktubers. If you watch a lot of those larger booktubers, I watch a whole bunch of them, you will have noticed a couple of months ago all of them starting to do in-channel sponsorship talks about BetterHelp, an online psychological counseling service that was billed by all of these different larger booktubers as a way to fit counseling into your busy schedule, where you don't need to make an appointment to go to a therapist's office. Instead, BetterHelp has a team of therapists. You log on, you select a plan, frequency and payment and whatnot, load in some details of yourself, and you are connected via email or Skype with a therapist in the privacy of your own home. And in other words, BetterHelp was marketed as psychiatry for a demographic of people who are solipsistic enough to think that they have massively important, treatable psychological problems, and lazy enough to want to do it all in their own home without actually bothering to go to a therapist's office. In other words, psychotherapy for millennials. And it took off. These people dangled great sponsorship deals in front of a whole bunch of booktubers. And one of them was Philip DeFranco, who's massively popular on YouTube. He affects an impartial but intelligent and sometimes very biting everyman demeanor. Very much talks about his viewers as nation. I've never called you nation, and I never will. I've never called you fam, and I never will. But he talks about his viewers as someone in every video. He talks about his viewers as people that he respects. I want to hear from you. Let's start a dialogue on all the subjects that he brings up. He talks about YouTube drama, ephemeral stuff from the outside world, and also major news stories. And he makes a very quick, very peppy show. And he himself touted BetterHelp, and he did it in the same terminology that many other booktubers I watched did, where they didn't just describe what BetterHelp is and say that it was a really good service, but then make a point of saying that they're not just recommending it, they also use it. They've tried it themselves. And it's done wonders. It's been, as advertised, it's been very good. And the drama last week in BookTube is that BetterHelp is looking more and more like an open scam. Their terms of service, when you read the fine print, tell customers that they don't take any responsibility for vetting their own therapist. The therapist can be anybody. It's up to you to vet the qualifications of the therapist. They're not going to do that. When you'd think that would be the one thing they would do, the terms of service also made it clear that they're not responsible for any bad outcomes and whatnot. And the terms of service also made it clear that they were selling the personal information of the people who logged on. And I'm thinking that most of the bigger booktubers who were offered BetterHelp sponsorship deals didn't bother to read through the fine print because it's looking like BetterHelp offered them a per capita bonus for each person they signed up. So it's possible that a lot of those booktubers had an incentive of just open greed. But that doesn't excuse them saying, I'm sure that BetterHelp went to them and said, we'd really like you to promote our product, and as a means of doing that, we will offer you a free sample. you can get a free session. And I am sure that when BetterHelp made that offer to the booktubers they wanted to advertise their product, they made sure to have a very good person right there at the other end of that email exchange, unlike what they would do to plebeians who just pledge their money. So I am pretty positive that most of the big booktubers who said that they used BetterHelp and had a good experience actually did, but they only used it once. And they only had a good experience because the BetterHelp knew who they were ahead of time. It creates a sickening, when you go back and look at some of those videos. I went back and looked at some of the videos that had those sponsorship pitches on them, and it creates a sickening feeling to see how similar they are in wording, in tone, in affect, in length of time, almost as if that kind of a personal recommendation was part of the deal. And that's bad enough. Many of those bigger booktubers are now scrambling to get themselves disinvested from this sponsor. But it's worse with Philip DeFranco, because he was actually in business with BetterHelp. He wasn't just receiving a sponsorship deal from them. He was helping to promote their sponsorship deals with other booktubers. He was aggressively marketing for them with his own channel, through his own links. And that makes it worse, because if you're a 20-something, motivational speaker on YouTube, and BetterHelp comes to you with this great deal, you might take it and not scrutinize the fine print, and then just regret your actions, and no harm, no foul, except for the loyal fans of your channel who use their trust in you to sign up for this thing that is looking more and more like a scam. That's bad enough. But Philip DeFranco, if he's entering into a business partnership with these people, is obliged to read every word of the fine print, and it would have immediately noticed. I would think. He seems like a very smart guy. I'm sure he employs very smart guys. They would have immediately noticed this is a huge liability. This is a disaster waiting to happen. If these therapists, or alleged therapists, aren't even vetted by BetterHelp, then who knows who these customers are talking to? And that makes it was the scandal of the week for BookTube, because these booktubers were approached. It wasn't just anybody. It wasn't World of Warcraft gamers or anything like that. The people that BetterHelp approached were the people who had developed a very palpable feeling of trust with their audience. And that trust was abused. Not just by BetterHelp, but by these booktubers. And that, it just creates a stain all over. And it's an ongoing story. We don't really know how it's going to end, except that I assume that BetterHelp will just disappear if they're not sued out of existence. But the thing that I wanted to mention in connection with the BookTube drama that I mentioned is that Philip DeFranco's response to the whole thing is entirely on him. Whether or not BetterHelp obscured the problematic parts of their terms of service from him, or hoped that he wouldn't notice, is one thing. Anybody can make that mistake. But his response to what happened is entirely on him. And he has a video. He has a BookTube channel. Or not a BookTube. He has a YouTube channel. He's a massively popular YouTuber. And he originally made a response video saying, I am going to go with a reporter to BetterHelp's offices. I'm going to find out what's going on, and I will report back to you. And after that, what he did was post a small and rather sniveling announcement on his Twitter that he was severing relationships with them. He's a YouTuber. If you're going to do the correct response, the right response, you make a video. You don't put it on Twitter where no one's going to see it, and where it looks like you're trying to ease your way out the back door from something you were majorly involved in. And there's also, at this late date, at the time of this video, there's also some question as to whether or not he actually is divesting himself of this thing. It looks like his company's links to BetterHelp are still active, which would make it just awful if, on the one hand, you're trying to placate a mob by saying, I didn't know, and now I'm sorry, and I won't have anything to do with them, while at the same time leaving the door open for you to profit from the few credulous people who are still taking advantage of this service. We shall see. We'll see how it all boils out. And that was YouTube news. And then I'm afraid I have to end on a downer note, also about bad responses, and that is world news. And it's not easy. It hits fairly close to home. A Washington Post columnist, a legal resident of the United States, Jamal Khashoggi, was lured to a Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul. And there he was butchered alive by a team of Saudi assassins who had been flown into the country specifically for that purpose. by the completely authorized, initiated, and paid for by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who is currently burnishing a public relations image of himself as a forward-thinking figure in the repressive and backward and theocratic kingdom. All of this had to happen on his orders, and it's horrific. It's a journalist being lured to his death and then murdered and butchered like a livestock animal. You know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that firsthand evidence of that death is going to surface, probably next week. Either audio or video or both. You know that it will surface. That's the world we live in. And the bad response here, I'm not faulting King Salman or his Crown Prince or anybody else for bad responses, because I think they're thoroughly evil people. I wouldn't expect anything else from them than what they're doing, which is blanket denials. No, the bad response is from the President of the United States, who is siding with Saudi Arabia. He has said, with his arms crossed over his shoulders like a recalcitrant child, he has talked about the huge financial deals that his administration has worked out with the Saudis for military equipment. He's talked about not wanting to jump to conclusions. He's talked about how the king of Saudi Arabia has adamantly denied that his country was involved in butchering a Washington Post columnist, like they're going to admit that. It's once again on his part a reaction that combines staggering and unbelievably depressing amounts of evil and naivete. And that's, so far, again, as the time of this recording, that is the United States response. That we'll wait and see what happens, but he says he's innocent. The Saudis say they're innocent. So it doesn't matter that you're showing me airport footage of known assassins being flown into the country. It doesn't matter that you show me surveillance footage of the Crown Prince's right-hand man entering the embassy. It doesn't matter that the columnist was seen going in and not seen coming out. None of that matters. What matters is, I don't even know. But I know one thing for sure. When that footage surfaces, when all doubt is removed, there'll be no apology from this White House, and there'll be no alteration in plans. Which means, I haven't heard anyone in American press say so, but it means it's open season on journalists. Anywhere in the world, except American soil. And even that, I'm sorry to end on a downer, but the note I want to end with for the world news is that this is a horrifying development. Horrifying. Not just that it would happen, but that the United States' initial response to the killing and butchering of a Washington Post columnist would be, let's wait and see. The Saudis say they're innocent. I don't really know what's going on. Let's not jump to conclusions. Prevaricating and talking about financial deals when it's obvious those two things are connected. The reason that you're temporizing and excuse-making for vicious murderers is because there's a lot of money on the table. Anyway, I promise that the next Last Week in BookTube will not end on such a downer note. And keep in mind, we've covered a lot of fun stuff. It's just that I want to do BookTube news, YouTube news, and world news at the end of every Last Week in BookTube. So we'll end there for now. And I will be back. Now, I know this is a Thursday upload, which is kind of a weird thing. You'd expect that Last Week in BookTube would happen on the weekend. So I think what I will do to get back in the swing of things will be to do another Last Week in BookTube this weekend that only covers the last few days. We'll just do another installment of these. Won't be quite so hideously long. And then we'll be back in business. And we'll just do it on the weekends. It'll be another fun thing that we do on the weekends. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That was Last Week in BookTube. As usual, I would love to hear from you what you watched that I might have missed. And I will try to remember to leave all the links down below so you can hunt down all the stuff I talked about. And I'll wrap this up for now. But I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.